I am from a family of teachers, pastors, artists, and refugees. I'm a second-generation Armenian American. My mother was the first generation to be born in America. My grandfather and my grandmother were strangers, and somebody welcomed them in. In 1915, the Ottoman Empire began a systematic extermination of the Christian minority Armenian subjects from the place they called home, which was in the territory of modern-day Turkey. The extermination was implemented in two phases: the wholesale killing of the able-bodied male population through massacre and forced labor, and the deportation of women, children, the elderly, and the infirm on death marches through the Syrian desert. Estimates are that 1 to 1.5 million people were killed. In fact, the term genocide was coined to describe this systematized, brutal slaughter of an entire people group. It would become the inspiration for a German dictator's final solution against the Jewish community. Hitler's twisted boast, who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians, is mounted in the Holocaust Museum. My grandparents were witnesses and survivors of the death marches, massacres, sexual abuse, and atrocities. They became a people without a home, strangers in their own country, and later, strangers in America. My grandfather, or Papa as I often called him, came from a family of cabinet makers and carpenters. He entered the U.S. around 1916 under his trade name Alexander Najarian, or Alexander the Carpenter. He spoke 7 languages, completed his education in Egypt while still a refugee, and came by ship through Ellis Island, a stranger in a strange land. He was first welcomed by a local missionary organization who asked him to join them on a whistle-stop tour of the country, telling his story as they tried to raise support for their organization. He wound up in Central California, where he found the terrain and climate a comforting similarity to his homeland. It was here that he attended a tent revival and came to know Christ personally, soon thereafter becoming aware of a tug on his heart towards ministry. In 1922, he was welcomed by a Christian college community located in Anderson, Indiana, then called Anderson Bible Training School, to pursue his theological education. That same community would welcome his great-granddaughter 91 years later. Somewhere in the late 1930s, Alex had been welcomed by the community of Fresno, California. He began the first Armenian-speaking church in the city, opened a grocery store, and even managed to farm a small plot of land. He endeared himself to everyone he met as the short, cheery pastor-grocer with the funny, thick accent. Alex became a conduit of the hospitality and compassion he had received. His home, his table, and his business would be the welcome mats for many who, in Emma Lazarus's words, were the tired, poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And that spirit of welcome would be passed on from one generation to the next. I grew up in an environment where everyone was always welcome. I am aware in an almost everyday kind of way that because my grandfather Alex was forced to leave his home and then was welcomed in America in such a way that would change his life and in turn change mine, that I have a responsibility to keep my heart and my life open to welcoming the stranger. I'm grateful for this life that is mine due to so many factors, but starting first with the fact that somebody welcomed my Papa, a stranger.